Today's comparison is a bit like this. It's apples for apples. Well, why do I say that? Because these two cars are from the same Renault-Nissan alliance. The Nissan Magnite and the Renault Kiger are what we're comparing today. They're both based off the CMFA Plus platform. They both have identical powertrains and gearboxes and even identical power figures. So are they different? Which one should you buy? That's what I'm here to tell you. While they are built off the same platform and their wheelbase and 205mm ground clearance is identical, the other dimensions do vary slightly. Now, where the Kiger does have an advantage is in boot space. It has a class-leading 405 litres of boot capacity. And that can be folded down to open up more room in a 60-40 split. Now, the Magnite's rear seats can also be folded down in a 60-40 split for more space. However, with the seats up, it has a smaller 336-litre boot. While those are the numbers, when you see both, one really doesn't look a lot smaller or bigger than the other. Visually, the Magnite has the beefier front with the large grille and more angled accents. The Kiger closely resembles the Kwid, especially when viewed from front. On the side, both sit on identical 190/60R16 wheels, but I like the Magnite's alloys a little more. While the Kiger's window line kinks up and meets the blackened roof, the Magnite keeps a more straight line with larger glass areas. The Kiger's rear screen is raked a lot more, and both of them have solid hips when viewed from the rear. Now, while the Magnite has similar tail lamps to the Triber, the Kiger has C-shaped ones that extend the hips out and make the rear look really wide. Both have the 4 skid plates for added beef. Which one do you think looks better? Let us know in the comments. Now, while I get inside the cars, why don't you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when videos go up on our channel and help us reach the 2 million subscriber mark real quick. First up, let's look at the Kiger. The Kiger has a very neatly laid out dash, and there's a pattern strip that runs right across the dash in another color that breaks it and gives it a bit of highlight. And to add highlight, there are lots of splashes of chrome that surround the knobs and the gear lever. Taking center stage is the 8-inch touchscreen infotainment, which comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on higher trims. You can also opt for a charging pad, but that here in the Kiger is a bit of a difficult spot to access. There's another storage space, and there are plenty of storage spaces around this cabin. It does have 2 glove box compartments, where the Magnite has 1. The dials are also crisp and clear, the digital dials, and they have some cool graphics that change with the drive mode, so that's really interesting as well. Now, what grabs your attention first when you get into the Magnite is these large sport car-like vents. Not sure I'm a fan of these. The dash itself is layered. There's a pattern finish along the middle, but plastics do feel a bit hard. The touchscreen itself is the same size as in the Renault Kiger, and you do also get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay wirelessly. As in the Kiger, you do also get the option of wireless charging, and the AC controls are the same as there are in the Kiger. The central console is quite different here, with a large asymmetrical step up between the gear lever and the aircon controls. It looks a little old-fashioned and as if it were an afterthought. The instrument panel is TFT, and it has a variety of screens to toggle through. However, they are not as nice as the Kigers. Now, as far as touchscreens go, they are the same size and have almost the same functions, but the one on the Kiger is flat, where the colors on the Magnite pop better, and even the layout and variety of screens is better. However, the graphics on the Kiger are sharper and clearer, and it responds to touch commands a little better too. Overall, it's the Kiger's cabin that I like more. It looks more modern and it is more pleasing to the eye. But how do they stack up on features? Well, the Magnite gets cruise control, connected tech, 360-degree cameras, traction control, TPMS, hill start assist and ESC, which the Kiger doesn't have. However, the Kiger gets 4 airbags, which is 2 more than the Magnite, and drive modes as well. For the rest, they are on par. Let's take a look. However, when it comes to safety features, it is the Magnite that has quite a few more than the Kiger. Okay, first up, we're heading out in the Magnite. Now, initially this dash feels a little high, so I need to get my seat height adjusted, and that's good enough. So, let's get going. Now, like I said, both of them get an identical 1-litre turbo petrol engine with 100 HP and 160 Nm of torque. And today I'm driving the manual version of both with a 5-speed manual. Now, first impression is that the engine is quite refined for a 3-cylinder. Clutch is a bit snappy, so when you start off at signals, you'll find yourself surging ahead, and even in stop-start traffic at times you'll find yourself leaping forward, and it takes a little getting used to. However, once you start moving, it accelerates quite cleanly, and as long as you're gentle with the throttle, you'll find that responses are quite good. However, if you do slow down and you want to pick up the pace again, you will need to shift a gear down. If you want that sudden burst of power, you will have to work the gears. It's not a car to be a lazy driver in. You can't amble around in a higher gear and pick up the pace easily. It is a small turbo petrol. However, work it with a gentle foot, and then whether it's city traffic or open roads, it feels more energetic. It doesn't really react well to flattening your foot to the floor except when you start off. In fact, its flat-out acceleration time 0 to 100 at 11.19 seconds makes it one of the quickest around. The steering is light and easy enough. However, return to center is not quite as quick as I would like it to be. Also, there's a bit of a dead zone at the center and it's not very consistent. Around corners, the Magnite does have more roll and it doesn't feel as settled or as composed as the Kiger either. However, that is in comparison and the difference is not large enough to make it a deal breaker. So let me tell you about the Kiger and what it feels like. So straight off the bat, the dash line's not quite so high in the Kiger, so I feel like I'm sitting quite high up and I get a more king of the road feel with a very good visibility. And the seats themselves, they're a little firmer than in the Magnite. Under thigh support is not quite as good as it is in the Magnite. And another thing that I've noticed is that the window buttons here in the Kiger are a little further back, so they're not quite as ergonomic or as convenient to use as those in the Magnite. Now, although both cars are pretty similar at idle, they're both quiet, but they have that little amount of vibration on the pedals and the steering and the gear lever that remind you that they are 3-cylinder cars. The difference really lies when you get going. The Kiger's engine can be heard a lot more than the Magnite. It's not quite as refined, especially when you rev it hard. Now, the Kiger also has a bit of a snappy clutch release, but it's a little bit better than that of the Magnite. And the difference really here in the performance is made by the driving modes. You have Eco, which is for efficiency. And this responds quite well even in path throttle. If you're ambling around in the city, you won't really have a problem even in Eco mode. Even flat out throttle responses, it kind of overrides the system, so you get a move on quite easily. Then of course you have normal, where you do feel that little bit extra spring in the step and energy over the eco mode. And when you put it into sport, then it really gets a spring in its step and responses do feel a little sharper and quicker. So with the driving modes overall, the Kiger does offer that little bit more exciting performance. Now the difference in the Kiger is when you're at cruising speeds with the advantage of the driving modes, when you want that sudden burst of power, you just need to flatten your foot and it will get a move on much quicker than the Magnite. However, if you need to slow down and get a move on again, it will also make you work the gears. The Kiger's gearbox though feels slightly smoother than the Magnite, but the difference is marginal. In normal mode, the performance feels pretty similar to the Magnite. Here too, using a lighter foot on the pedal gives you better responses overall. Both cars have light enough clutches and feel easy enough to maneuver. It's when you pick up the pace, the Kiger feels like it has an advantage. The Kiger steering has a little bit more weight, so it is heavier than that of the Magnite. But that's not to say that you'll find it, heavy under parking or in city driving. In fact, it gives you a really nice, good, connected feel to the road. And at higher speeds, that inspires a lot of confidence. In fact, the Kiger's entire composed manner inspires confidence behind the wheel. Now, with the steering that responds quickly off-center, even around corners, it is the better of the two. The car just has a more planted, secure feel, and that also helps its ride quality. Now, we did say that both cars had identical wheelbases. Does that translate into identical space in the back seat? Well, that's what I am about to stop and find out right now. There's an impressive amount of space for this size of car at the back. I'm 5'4", but as you can see, there's still a lot more leg room here, even for a taller person. There is space to stretch your feet out under the front seat in the footwell as well. Third passenger has enough space here too, with the seat being nice and flattish, and with the floorboard being flat, there is enough leg room for the third passenger as well. So yeah, on the space front, it's impressive. There is enough headroom as well. The seats in the Magnite feel a little bit more comfortable than those in the Kiger because there's more under-thigh support. They're a lot better cushioned as well, and you sit higher up, so visibility out to the front is good, and even the window line doesn't feel too high. Now, it does have a supple edge over the bumps and potholes, and it does flatten them out quite nicely. But there is a fair bit of movement in the Magnite, so on uneven sections of road, you do get tossed up. And there is a fair bit of up and down movement and even side-to-side movement in the Magnite. Both cars have ISOFIX attachment for child seats, rear AC vents and a 12-volt charger. Back-to-back comparisons really make it easy to pick up the smallest of differences, and that was what happened when I stepped into the backseat of the Kiger. As far as space goes, I think they're very, very similar. It's like splitting hairs between the two. There's millimeters of difference, with the Kiger having the slight edge. There's enough space to stretch your feet out even here under the seat. Third passenger also has enough leg room over here at the back. But the seat is firmer. Under-thigh support is not quite as good as the Magnite, and you sit lower too. And with the window line rising up towards the rear, it's not quite as open and airy as the Magnite. But when you do go over bumps or, at higher speeds on uneven roads, you don't get tossed around as much or moved around as much in this backseat. It is more flat and composed, and I definitely prefer this ride. While neither of these cars have a global NCAP rating, both of them are based off the same platform as the Triber, which recently scored 4 stars in the global NCAP test. So that is reassuring to know. So apples to apples it really is. These are two very similar cars with small differences that set them apart. The Magnite visually offers a little more of an SUV look. It's a touch more refined and it offers key equipment and safety features at a marginal step up in price. The small Nissan is definitely a value buy. But the Kiger fights back with 2 more airbags and gets driving modes which enhances the drive experience. In fact, the Kiger has the better ride and handling, is the nicer of the two from behind the wheel. It also has more pleasing interior, a marginally bigger boot, and the differences are so small between the two it's like splitting hairs, and clearly it will boil down to what your personal preferences are. But as an overall package, the Kiger felt better and the more mature of the two.
Okay, rolling Pradeep? Roll. Okay, ready, stand by.
A little bit less under thigh support so the window line does feel a little higher in the Kiger.